This is the Chappell Real Estate Show, episode number 20.
Welcome to the Chappell Real Estate Show, your source for the latest real estate information so you can buy, sell, and invest with the best in Texas. Whether you're a first-time buyer, a current homeowner, or a seasoned investor, you've come to the right place. We're here to simplify all things real estate so you can achieve your goals of property ownership with your hosts, Daniel and Roger Chappell.
What's up, everybody, and thank you guys for tuning into the Chappell Real Estate Show, your source for the latest real estate information so that you can learn how to buy, sell, and invest with the best. I'm your host, Daniel Chappell, and I'm here with my co-host, Roger Chappell today. How are you doing today, Dad?
I'm great. How are you doing?
Oh, doing fantastic. Well, today we are going to be talking about the 5 things that your realtor should be telling you. And they're somewhat of, I guess, secrets in one way or another. And, you know, it's definitely something that you need to know and be aware of when you get into the business of buying a house. So, you know, definitely really exciting content for you guys today. So stay tuned until the end of the episode. All right, guys. So before we get into today's secrets of the day, let's talk about today's Chappell chunk. So I'm going to turn it over to my dad here to deliver the chunk today.
So, folks, one thing that Daniel and I have tried to impart with all you folks is always to use a professional when you get into this business. So when you're looking to buy or sell a home, either one, you need to make sure that you have a professional working for you. Now, with that said, these are some things that you're going to learn today that you really do need to ask your realtor about. So take what we're giving you today and use this information and ask your realtor. They should be able to tell you the answers to these questions very quickly. And if they can't, you're probably not working with a true professional.
All right, so let's dive into the 5 secrets that your realtor should be telling you. So number 1, we're going to talk about open houses because this is one that we hear all the time. You know, I think at every single listing appointment that we've ever been on, the seller asks us, you know, well, let's do an open house. I think we can sell the house at an open house. So open houses, who do they really help? Dad?
Well, one statistic that most people don't ever know is how many homes are actually sold in an open house. So the habit is that people watch these programs on TV, HGTV and DIY Network and all that, and they see in California especially, a lot of folks sell their houses during an open house. Well, that's just simply not the case. Literally nationwide, the statistic is somewhere less than 2% of homes are sold at an open house. So what does that mean? Well, that means that the buyer that comes through that open house buys that house at less than 2% of the time. Mind you, that's not because a realtor sent them to the open house. This is a buyer off the street, unrepresented, maybe represented, but just happens to go through an open house and then decides to buy that house. Less than 2%. So who does this really help? Who do the open houses really help? Well, actually, it helps all 3 entities involved in one of these things. Number 1, mostly it helps the agent, the listing agent. Why does it help the listing agent? Because when they're hosting the open house, and I do some open houses, but I typically will not do my own listing as an open house. And we can get into another discussion on that another day. But to me, it has to do with dual agency. I'm not a big fan of that. But instead, if I am hosting an open house, the reason that I'm there is not just to sell the house, but to get buyer leads. So that's typically what happens is that agents are there to get buyer leads. They're really not interested in necessarily selling your house because in today's market, truly, it's probably not going to sell during the open house anyway. And we all know this. So instead, they can actually get some information from some buyers. And so a lot of times when you see people register, it's not just because of the seller. Although most of the time, if I'm hosting an open house, it's because the seller has requested it. And I need to know who's going through their house. You would want me to know that too. So I do have the register for that. But then again, too, it's also a great way for me to keep in touch with these folks. Number 2, it also helps the seller in that regard, especially in a very busy market. So in today's market, unlike just 6 months ago here in the Austin area, open houses really do help sellers. Why is that? Because when we host the open houses, we have a lot more people going through them today than what we did 6 months or a year ago. A lot more people. So, I mean, used to be, if we got 3 people come through an open house on a weekend, that was awesome. Now we're getting I mean, literally, if you do the open house the very first weekend, you're probably going to get 30, 40 people come through an open house, and that's no joke. Now, the reason that helps the seller is because we're able to get more buyers in there. So as a listing agent in today's market, I wouldn't recommend that we do that. And the reason being is that a lot of agents are busy with a lot of stuff going on, and they've got a lot of buyers. But they can send their buyer through that open house, let them take a look at it while the buyer is busy doing some other stuff, maybe with another client, or maybe something family related. But at least the buyer gets a chance to go through and see the house. Then they can turn around and get back to their buyer's agent and say, look, we really like this house. We want to submit an offer on it, et cetera, et cetera. And then for the last one, I prefer to have Daniel explain that on the buyer side.
Yeah, so the last person that it's going to help is usually the buyer. So you have to figure, a lot of buyers in today's market, there's always some of the looky-loo neighbors, and there's a little bit of that going on when you do open houses. But in today's market, it's just crazy busy, and realtors are working their butts off to, try to get people into houses as much as possible. And just, you can assume that an agent that has a listing probably has a buyer that they need to be helping at some point or another too. And in today's market, buyer's agents are working incredibly hard to show properties. So as a listing agent, if you're able to hold the house open, that's not only a benefit to the agent, not only a benefit to the seller, but as well as the buyer, because not every buyer is going to have an agent who's going to be available to take them out to these properties. So, that's a big plus, not to mention the fact that every now and again, you might have an unrepresented buyer who's walking through the house who may not have somebody to assist them in making an offer on your property. So, it really helps everybody involved, as my dad already mentioned. Everybody involved in the transaction benefits from an open house, especially in a market like today's, what we're experiencing in the Austin area.
But again, don't expect your house to sell in an open house, because it's probably not going to.
But today you'll probably get an offer from somebody who walked through it, no doubt. But
Yep.
Remember, you can only sell that house to one person. And if you had 500 people walk through the open house, only one of them is going to get it. So
That's right.
the number two secret that your realtor should be telling you is going to be clutter, cleanliness, staging, and scent all matter when it comes to listing your house. So we talk about this in countless episodes previously where, curb appeal, cleanliness, and clutter, the 3 C's that sell homes, right? For us, it's not necessarily a secret. We tell all of our clients this, but not everybody understands it because, I can't tell you how many pictures in the MLS that I see or houses that I walk through, and I'm just like, you've got to be kidding me, right? I mean, the houses are dirty. You can see dogs and people sitting on couches and stuff in pictures. It's like, no wonder.
Or even when you show up to show the house, you've got the tenants still there with their dogs and the smell, and they just got finished cooking or burning something, who knows what. And then they're willing to show you the house that is not well kept, and the beds aren't made, and the clothes are laying about, and yeah.
Yeah. And
happens.
bless their hearts. I actually, a couple of weeks ago, I went through a house and same exact situation. The tenants were there and super friendly guy. He takes us through the house all enthusiastic, showing us around, pointing out all the best things about the house. And the whole time we're just walking through thinking, it smells like dog in here. And man, the carpets are stained. And there's just, all these little things, nothing that you want to tell them, but oh man, yeah.
A list of stuff when you leave.
Oh yeah.
So one thing that I have learned that I found very interesting is about smell. So, since we're talking about dog smell, and I will tell you this, if you've been smoking inside the house or you've got cats or maybe dogs that haven't been cleaned recently or things like that, those odors or carpet, because that odor gets into the carpet, and that is a problem. Smoking especially. I can't tell you how many people I've talked to that have taken listings where people have been smoking inside the house, and that has that's a very difficult smell to get rid of. Once that odor is in the house, it's hard. You're going to have to repaint the house, most likely. Remove all the carpets and replace those with something else. But that's one aspect of it. But the thing that I found interesting was, I used to hear people say, well, bake cookies and have that kind of a smell. That really isn't the right fragrance, believe it or not. There were 2 things that I've learned that are the ones that people remember most. And believe me, I don't know how many hundreds of homes that I've been through in the last few years where, you do pay attention to the scent. And my favorite actually is either the apple cinnamon or citrus. Citrus is extremely popular and it's unique. when I say popular, I mean it's not necessarily that everybody's using it, because they're not. It's unique because they're not using it. It's popular because, in my mind, it is a very friendly aroma, and it's one that will make you remember that house later on in the afternoon. The other thing, too, is baked bread.
Interesting.
Baked bread really piques people's interest. I mean, who doesn't like the smell of baked bread?
Yeah,
It's kind of like bacon.
True.
Who doesn't like the smell of bacon?
That's what I'd be cooking every morning. No.
But to be honest, when you go into a house, if you smell bacon, all you want to do is, okay, I'm going to eat bacon.
Yeah.
But when it comes to bread, everybody loves the smell of bread. The first thing that I think of, man, this feels like home.
So we make light of the whole bacon thing, but it's funny that you mentioned that, because you don't want anything in the house that's going to pull people's attention away from the actual house, right? So, and that's kind of something that we're going to talk about in a second, as far as, the cleanliness and the clutter and all that stuff. But, I've walked through houses before where, the sellers have beautiful art throughout. And, I actually walked through a house recently where one of the tenants is an artist. So she was going through and she, beautiful art all over the walls. And the buyers I was working with, they were going from room to room. Wow, I love this piece of art. Wow, I love this. This is amazing. Gosh, and of course they were there too. So she's complimenting the seller all day long. I don't think they paid attention to any of the features of the home. I don't think they saw the rooms. I don't think they, they were looking right past that and looking at everything else that not the features of the home had to offer, but the things that were inside of it had to offer. So
that brings up one of the points that I mention to my sellers all the time, and that is, I want the buyer to fall in love with the house, not the sellers. And in something like that, the buyers are falling in love with the seller and all of her precious artwork. And that's all well and good, but she's not there to sell the artwork. She's trying to sell her house.
Absolutely. So that kind of leads into, you got to make sure that you keep everything clean and clear. So if you're going to have an open house, or if you have a busy weekend of showing scheduled, make sure that those countertops are clean. Make sure that the beds are made and not just thrown over, but tighten the comforter over it. Make it look nice and clean, so that I want you to be able to tell if somebody went in there and put their finger or their hand on your bedspread. Like, you should have it looking pristine, because those things matter. People like to walk through the house and get an idea of, what can I fit in this room? And that's another thing, is you want to have it staged. Empty homes look way smaller, and it's harder for a buyer to visualize what they can fit inside of the property if they don't have anything there to kind of help them imagine it. So extremely, extremely important to have it nice, clean, and staged.
One other thing, too, is toilets. Close the toilet lids. I mean, and I've done this myself. Taking pictures just for myself to try to run around and like for a lease listing. I may take pictures of a lease listing and put some of those out there, and then I'm going back through later on like, oh my God, I left the freaking toilet lid up? Really? Always close the toilet lids, empty the trash cans, those kinds of things. It's really important to do that, because, I mean, when a buyer walks in there, you don't want them being distracted and making comments about the dirtiness of the house or the clutter or things like that. They really need to be focused on the house itself, not on all the other little things.
Absolutely. Well, those are really great points. So again, open houses, who do they help? Everybody that's involved. Secret number 2 is make sure that you keep the house clean, clutter-free, and the scents and the staging absolutely matter. Your third secret of the day is going to be, make sure you read before you sign anything. So the biggest thing we're going to talk about right now is establishing agency, and we had a brief conversation about this before we started the episode, and I think this topic warrants its own episode one of these days. But we're going to kind of touch on a couple of the things that come along with establishing agency. So Dad, what is establishing agency? What does it mean for a buyer when they've now found a realtor and that realtor has presented them with the information about brokerage services and a representation agreement? What do those things mean for the buyer?
So basically, without getting into details, and in Texas, because we are going to have an episode specifically on this, but in Texas, the listing agreement and the information about brokerage services, the IABS, the information about brokerage services, is required by the state anytime an agent has a serious conversation with a prospect or a person about real estate. Now, that's very subjective. So a lot of times you'll see in our email signatures, above the signature, but in our emails, you will see links that will take a person to the links that we have to discuss these particular forms. Now, the reason that's important is because agency is basically the relationship between a broker and the buyer or the seller. So, or any person who's looking to do something in real estate. So, what that means is it's not necessarily the relationship between me as the agent and the individual. It's my broker. So, what does that mean? Well, anytime you sign an agreement, you're not actually just agreeing or signing that agreement with the agent that you're speaking to, but with the broker. And me as an agent, I act for my broker in all of these transactions that I do, which means the decisions that I make and the advice that I give and all that kind of stuff is actually coming directly from my broker through me, if that makes sense. So when we establish agency like that, that's also the way how we get paid, for lack of a better term. And we could really go into detail on all of this, but again, I don't want to take away from a future episode. But basically, establishing agency is establishing a relationship regarding real estate.
And one of the reasons why it's important and why we mention it as make sure you read before you sign anything is because the agency, when you establish agency, that's going to be the first step of your relationship with your realtor. So it's important that you understand what that relationship actually means, because once you actually sign on the dotted line on a representation agreement, that means that you are agreeing to exclusively work with that agent and that brokerage. So you want to make sure that you're ready to take that step before you sign on it, because if you decide that you don't want to work with that agent and you happen to walk into an open house next weekend and you find another agent who you feel is better suited to represent you, and they go and take you to look at a property, you decide to make an offer on that property, the agent that has the original representation agreement with you can come back to you and sue for specific performance, or rather sue for the commission that you agreed to pay them when you established that agency agreement with them. So it's extremely important that you understand what that agency agreement means, and there are ways to get out of it. Our team has a habit of making sure that the agency agreement reflects whatever the MLS is going to pay versus having the buyer come out of pocket to pay us, and some other things. But it's extremely important that you understand what that agency relationship means, so that you don't get yourself caught up in some kind of a lawsuit or something to that effect with another agent who.
Another brokerage.
Right, another brokerage who's trying to keep your best interest at heart. So. The other couple of things that we want to mention about the agency agreement is, as Roger mentioned, it is one of the ways it's how we get paid. So the commission is tied into these agency agreements, and it is always negotiable. So that commission is between you and the broker that you establish that relationship with. So understand that it is negotiable before you sign as well.
So let me explain and clarify that just a little bit. The commission is negotiable on the listing side. So what that means is when Daniel, as my client, my seller, signs the listing agreement, in that listing agreement, we talk about the commission that's going to be paid to both the buyer's broker and to my broker as the listing broker. Though that percentage goes to my broker to begin with. So that commission is negotiable. Now, once I put it on MLS, then the buyer's agent comes in. Well, that commission is no longer negotiable. It's negotiable only with the listing side of it. On the buyer side, it's what Daniel and I discuss as how that split is going to work out. That's already established in the listing agreement. And that's what we're also going to put on MLS. So on MLS, that's what the buyer's broker is going to be paid, not the buyer's agent, but the buyer's broker. And in this next episode that we keep talking about, we're going to explain all of that in greater detail. And I have noticed that there is so many people do not understand how agents get paid, and they don't understand about these listing agreements, and they don't understand about these buyer's agreements, or the buyer's representation agreements. That's why we mention that here, is that it's extremely important that you understand what you're signing. And I know when I'm working with buyers, I want them to sign a buyer's representation agreement with me before I actually begin doing all the work. And the reason being is I'm going to spend quite a bit of time working with my buyers, but they also have to understand and believe in the product that I'm going to deliver and the service that I'm going to deliver. So I don't have a lot of time to do that. And the reason being is that in today's market, when a buyer comes to me, they got to be ready to rock and roll. And we've got to be ready to, as a brokerage and as a team ourselves, we've got to be ready to represent our folks to the highest ability that we possibly can. So, and we can't do that without that buyer's representation agreement that actually gives us the permission to work for you as the buyer.
Absolutely. All right, so that leads us into secret number 4, which is going to be the importance of pricing. And this, I cannot emphasize enough how important it is that you understand pricing on your particular home before you take it to the market. So, I mean, man, where do we start here? There's so many places.
I have the perfect scenario for
Let's
this.
hear it.
All right. So, when you're pricing a home, okay, so let's assume, Daniel, you're going to be, we're going to do a little scenario for you here, okay?
Love it.
Daniel, you're going to be the seller. I'm going to come in, I've done my presentation, you've showed me your house, I've run the numbers on it, because before I come to meet with you, I need to find out what the market says that your home could be worth. And I say could be because until I get eyes on it, I'm not going to know for sure. Why is that important? Because when I walk through your house, I'm going to notice things that are improvements in your home that the county may not know about when they've assessed it. And not only that, other buyers don't know yet. And part of my listing presentation is to make sure that I highlight some of those things. Additionally, I need to find out why you, as the seller, fell in love with your house. So those kinds of things are very important. And they also help me establish what I believe to be a possible market price. Now, with that said, remember, I'm not saying what I think the house should be priced at. I'm going to provide the seller, you, Daniel, with all of the information. And in fact, we did this for real.
Yeah, not long ago.
Not long ago. So I'm going to provide my seller with all the information that I can about the specific price of the market for that particular home. What I mean by that is, you know, Daniel, you talk to a lot of your neighbors, and your neighbors tell you, oh, well, I sold my house for $300,000. Oh, wow. So my neighbors sold their house for $300,000. Mine's got to be at least worth $325,000. I've got a bigger yard. My house is prettier. I've got this. I've got that. So I've established in my mind that it's $325,000. And then here comes Roger. Roger sits down and runs all the numbers and says, you know, the market says that your house should be priced somewhere between $275,000 and $300,000. Well, you're going to be extremely disappointed. And you actually might get upset with me and throw me out of the house until I actually sit down and show you the proof. And I'm not talking to your neighbor. I'm actually going by what's on MLS. So when I'm doing that, the importance of all of this is, as a professional, I have been through tons of training with a number of different appraisers. So I know what appraisers are looking for when they go to price a home. When they appraise a home. Now, when a buyer comes through and they go to buy the home, is the appraisal important? Absolutely, it's important. Because in today's market, we're asking a lot of buyers to waive those appraisals. But at the same time, the buyer doesn't want to pay way more for a house than what it's truly worth. So the appraisal comes into play. Well, when an appraiser is looking at a house, they only care about what has sold in the last 90 to 180 days. They're not concerned with what the market trends are, typically. I say typically because I am starting to see today, because we've had such a dramatic increase in such a short period of time, that appraisers are paying attention to that. But it's not something they can actually write down. But it is something that does come into play. If you overprice the house and we price it the way your neighbor says, then we're not going to sell your house. We're going to list it, but we're not going to sell it. So keep this in mind. If you're talking to an agent and they give you some unrealistic number, or they listen to you and go with what your number is without supporting data, you're probably not working with a true professional. A true professional is actually going to take a look at all the numbers and is going to give it to you the best that they can. And they're not getting this data from Zillow. They're not getting it from Realtor.com. They're not getting it from Redfin. They're not getting it from all these other websites. We as professionals are getting this information directly off MLS, which is where an appraiser is going to get the same information.
Absolutely. So who doesn't determine the price of your house? Well, your tax assessment doesn't determine the price that your house will sell for. Your neighbor doesn't determine the price that your house is going to sell for. Zillow and Realtor.com, they don't decide how much your house is going to sell for. At the end of the day, only a buyer is going to decide what your house is worth. And at the end of the day, you need the data that only realtors have access to. And that is the sold properties in your area that are comparable in size, age, and condition. Those are the most important things on pricing a home. So when we say your neighbor's house, it's great that your neighbor's house sold for that much, but we don't know the size of it. It could be a bigger or a smaller house. It could have more bedrooms. It could be a single or a two-story. It could have a pool. It could have a bigger yard. It could have more upgrades. It could be older. I mean, there's an endless list of the things that affect the value of a home. So none of those factors decide what your home is worth. Only a buyer decides what your home is worth, and realtors are going to be best equipped with the knowledge to let you know what's the right amount to price your home at so that you can get that buyer that wants to buy your home
at the maximum price possible.
Absolutely. All right, so now into the last secret of the day, and it is going to be things that your agent cannot tell you. Dad.
Yeah, so I get this question all the time. I'm retired law enforcement, and because of that, I wear it all the time. Everybody knows this. They can tell by the way I walk, by the way I talk, blah, 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 blah. So being prior law enforcement, everybody seems to think that I know all the crime stats. I do not know the crime stats. And guess what? I can't tell you what they are anyway. The law prohibits that. Guess what else? I'm not allowed to tell you how the school districts are. That's none of my business. And the reason being is that the federal government has now established that we as agents cannot give that information to you as the buyer. In order for you to get that information, you're going to have to do your own research. And by doing your own research, I tell this to my buyers all the time, and that is, it's your family, these are your kids. Only you are going to know if it's the right place for your family. Only you are going to be able to tell if that school district is right for you and your family. Only you are going to be able to determine by driving through the neighborhood, do I feel safe enough to live here? If none of those check boxes are checked off, then don't buy in that neighborhood. It's very simple.
Very simple. So something else that your realtor shouldn't be advising you on is writing love letters. So this is something that we've seen a ton of, especially in the market. I mean, buyers are desperate right now to get into homes. When they're up against 20, 30, sometimes 50, 100 other offers, they're doing everything they can. I mean, they're pulling every tool out of the toolbox. And one of those that we've seen a lot of lately is love letters. So the trouble with love letters, and I think that the intent behind them is good, but the trouble with them is that, there are a lot of things that you can accidentally give up about yourself and your family that can spark a bias in the seller if they read your letter. And the reason that's important to not do is because it could be construed as a fair housing violation. So the fair housing laws say that everyone has to be able to purchase a home. You cannot discriminate based on race, color, national origin, religion, sex, familial status, or disability. So if you write a letter and you say, my family and I are from Central America, or if you say, my kids and I, or the yard would be great for my kid with a disability, or if you mention any of these things in your love letter, it could spark a bias in that seller, and then you could unfortunately find yourself in a lawsuit if you're up against 20 other buyers and your offer wasn't the highest and best, and you attached a love letter that sparked a bias in the seller, and then this buyer down the street who put in an offer $50,000 over list price, and they feel like the reason their offer wasn't accepted was because they were discriminated against. It's just opened up a can of worms. So it's a very difficult situation, and I know the intention is good, but your agent should be advising you against doing that, just because it can cause problems.
So one of the things, and this is actually a relatively new problem, one of the things that I advise my sellers now is if I receive one of these quote-unquote love letters, I will not present that as part of the offer. And in fact, I discourage it with the other buyer's agents as well and tell them, don't send me that because I am not going to send it to the seller. I've already spoken with them. They've given me permission to withhold those things to begin with so as not to set myself up for any liability nor my sellers. So I want to make sure that in the beginning we set that expectation. So don't waste the time sending these love letters. Although, it may seem like it's very important to you as the buyer. Honestly, it could set you up later on, and we don't want that. Our goal is to provide a service where we can get our buyers and sellers into agreements to sell them homes, and we can't have these kinds of biases preventing those kind of things from happening. So don't do the love letters. As much as you love the house, and as innocent as it sounds, you could actually be setting yourself up for a bias, and you don't even know it. So don't do them.
So if you really love the house, don't write a love letter. Write a lovely offer.
Right? That's good. So I do have one other thing to add that I forgot about. And that is when you're walking through a house, one of the things that to keep in mind is surveillance video. And not just surveillance video. I completely forgot about this, but Alexa is all around us, and Google and all these other little devices that are now listening to us. And sometimes they may be recording our conversations. So when you go through someone else's house and you're looking at it and you're making all these comments, just remember that some of that stuff may be recorded, and you may not want that conversation to be heard by someone else. So when you're walking through the house, and your agents should be schooling you on this as well. If they're not, again, you may want to evaluate whether or not you're working with a professional. But when you're walking through these houses, keep your comments to yourself until you get outside, or write them down. Because you do want to make notes. And I'm in a pretty good habit of giving the buyers papers to write on that have the addresses on them so they can keep their own notes. And I tell them all the time, and this is very hard for us to do, but I tell them all the time, we won't discuss the house while we're in the house. We'll discuss it when we get outside. We will not discuss pricing while we're inside the house. We'll discuss it when we get outside. I just don't want to give the other side any advantage. That's part of the negotiation side of this. And I'm pretty good about the negotiation side. So we don't really want to...
Yeah, definitely
Don't
not.
take my ammo from me.
No, you don't want to show and put all your cards on the table. That's never a good thing to do in negotiations.
No. So, Daniel, there's one last thing that we haven't talked about.
There is. So there's one other thing that, depending on the scenario, we may or may not be able to tell you. But it is something that you should know to ask if it's something that makes you uncomfortable. So... in the state of Texas, at least, I can't speak for the rest of the country, but in the state of Texas, if someone has passed away in a home, it is only required that the seller of the home disclose it if it was a murder. So other deaths, natural causes, suicides, things of that nature, they're not required to be disclosed by the seller. So you have to ask that question. And we always say it never hurts to ask, because if you don't ask, the answer is always no. But if you ask... The seller may provide you with that information. The listing agent may provide you with that information. So if that's one of the things that you're interested in knowing, you might want to ask.
So one of the things that I have heard many times is when we're looking at some homes, there are some that the owner shows to be the owner shows to be an estate. So I frequently, when I notice that it's listed as the estate as an owner, then I want to ask the listing agent, did someone pass away in the home? And if so, was it through natural causes or suicide? How was that death? And most of the time, if they know, they'll tell me. Many times they don't, but it just depends. You never know. If you don't ask, the answer is always no. So I always ask. I'm very good about asking questions.
Yeah, absolutely. It never hurts. Well, everybody, I think that just about wraps up our 5 secrets for the day. So please, if you guys are in a real estate transaction, have worked with a realtor before in the past, and you know of a secret that we didn't talk about today, please let us know. Leave it in the comments. We'd love to hear from you guys. And again, reach out to us if you have any questions, if we can help you with any referrals. Again, I think we say it in every single episode, referrals, referrals, referrals. We're happy to help you. This is also how we make our bread and butter. So if there's anything that we can do for you, whether it be connecting you with a trade professional or connecting you with somebody in your area, or if it's assisting you, if you're in our area to buy, sell, or invest in real estate, we would be more than happy to assist you. So
I have something to ask of our listeners. reach out to us and send us your referrals, especially in the Georgetown, Texas area, Round Rock, Austin. Send us your referrals on nail salons, maybe a dentist, or somebody, any trade. I don't care if it's your favorite restaurant. Send us those referrals. We've got a massive referral list that we're putting together. And I noticed the other day, we don't have a nail salon. I need a nail salon, or 2 or 3 or 5. I need to have these information so that I can pass it on to some of our buyers and sellers, because you never know. By all means, please let us know. We're looking for anything that you may need. So send us the referrals. Tell us what they are. We'll be happy to include them on our list.
Absolutely. That is great. Tell us your favorite places in Austin, and we'll be more than happy to add them to our list and refer them to our friends and family and all of our clients. So thank you guys again for tuning into the Chappell Real Estate Show. This is the Chappell Realty Group signing off.
Thank you for joining us this week on the Chappell Real Estate Show. If you enjoyed this episode, share it with a friend and leave us a review. Find us on social media at Chappell Realty Group and online at chappellrealtygroup.com. Until next time.